Welcome to Wisdom Trek with Gramps. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, and we are on day 2688 of our trek. The purpose of Wisdom Trek is to create a legacy of wisdom, to seek out discernment and insights, and to boldly grow where few have chosen to grow before. In today's Wisdom Nugget, it's titled, The City Desecrated, a People Dishonored, a Cry from the Rubble. And it's a trek through Psalm 79 verses 1 through 4. Today we begin another poignant and heart-wrenching trek as we open Psalm 79 in the New Living Translation, encompassing the opening verses of 1 through 4. Psalm 79, like so many we've explored recently, is attributed to Asaph, but after a sweeping historical narrative in Psalm 78, which culminated in God's faithful establishment of David as the shepherd king, despite Israel's constant rebellion, Psalm 79 thrusts us abruptly back into the deepest depths of national tragedy. This psalm serves as a powerful communal lament, echoing the anguish that we felt in Psalm 74, specifically crying out in the immediate aftermath of the devastating destruction of Jerusalem and its holy temple, most likely when the Babylonians invaded in 586 BC. While Psalm 74 expresses the shock and confusion of the temple's ruin and God's apparent abandonment, Psalm 79 focuses on the horrifying intensity on the desecration of the sacred city itself, the brutal slaughter of the inhabitants, and the profound, unspeakable shame caused by the unburied dead. It's a desperate, visceral cry for God's immediate attention and vengeance in the face of unprecedented sacrilege and dishonor. For the ancient Israelites, this was not just a military defeat, it was a cosmic catastrophe, an assault on God's very dwelling place and his chosen people, whose identity was inexplicably linked to the land, their city, and their temple. The horror described here is the ultimate nightmare, a complete reversal of all the covenant blessings. So let's immerse ourselves in this raw, agonizing lament, feeling the weight of the despair and the profound pain of utter desecration and dishonor. Psalm 79, verses 1 through 4. O God, your inheritance has been invaded, your holy temple has been defiled, and Jerusalem is in a heap of ruins. The bodies of your servants and your godly people have been left for food for the vultures and the wild animals. The blood of your people has been poured out like water all around Jerusalem, and there is no one left to bury them. We are mocked by our neighbors, scoffed by those around us. The psalmist begins to cry on the profound violation and the outrage directed straight to God. O God, your inheritance has been invaded, your holy temple has been defiled, and Jerusalem is in a heap of ruins. This is an immediate gut-wrenching appeal. The psalmist doesn't just say their land has been invaded, he says your inheritance has. This implies God's ownership of the land and the people from Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 9. This invasion is thus an affront to God himself. The horror continues with the desecration of the holiest site. Your holy temple has been defiled. The temple was the most sacred place in the earth for the Israelite, the very dwelling place of God's presence. To have it defiled, the Hebrew word tameh, which means made unclean, by pagan invaders whose hands and idols had touched its sacred precincts, was the ultimate sacrilege. It wasn't merely destroyed, it was richly polluted, rendering it unfit for the divine presence and worship. This act directly challenges God's holiness and power. And the beloved city, the heart of the nation, suffered the same fate, and Jerusalem was in a heap of ruins. The once glorious mighty city where God had chosen to place his name, Psalm 76 verse 2, was now reduced to rubble, a pile of destruction. This sight would have been utterly devastating, signifying the complete reversal of God's promises of protection for Zion. This stands as a stark contrast to the secure, built-up Jerusalem that Psalm 78 implicitly looks toward with David's reign. Now it all seems undone. The psalmist then moves on to a description and a horrifying fate of the inhabitants, highlighting the ultimate dishonor of the dead. The bodies of your servants, your godly people, have been left for food for the vultures and wild animals. The blood of your people have been poured out like water all around Jerusalem, and there is no one left to bury them. This is perhaps the most gruesome and deeply offensive aspect of the tragedy from an ancient Israelite perspective. The victims are identified as your servants and your godly people, emphasizing their loyalty to God, making their horrific fate even more perplexing and unjust. To be unburied is to be exposed to vultures and wild animals. It was a profound curse and the ultimate dishonor in an ancient world, according to Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 26, and Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 33. The burial was a sacred duty, essentially for dignity of the dead and peace of the living. To deny this act was of extreme cruelty and contempt. The psalmist emphasizes this horror, painting a picture of total barbarity. The scale of the slaughter is depicted by the imagery. The blood of your people has been poured out like water all around Jerusalem. This conveys a sheer quantity of bloodshed, indiscriminately, without value, like water spilled on the ground. It's a grim reality, and there was no one left to bury them. This indicates the overwhelming death toll, perhaps the flight of the survivors, or the sheer terror and chaos that prevented proper burial rites. The land itself was defiled by the unburied dead, a horrifying spiritual and physical stain. This was not merely a defeat, it was a systematic humiliation designed to break the spirit of the people and to insult their God. The invaders didn't just conquer, they aimed to erase the very memory and the dignity of Israel. Finally, the psalmist expresses the crushing burden of the international shame and mockery. We are mocked by our neighbors, scoffed by all those around us. In the ancient Near East, the nation's prosperity and security were often seen as indicators of their God's power. When a nation suffered such a catastrophic defeat, its God was often perceived as weak and defeated. Thus Israel's suffering by the surrounding nations, that is, our neighbors, those around us, as signs of God's impotence. The mockery and the scoffing were not just casual insults, they were a public spectacle of humiliation, an open challenge to God's very existence and his power to protect his chosen people. This direct affront to God's honor reflected the shame of his people, and it becomes the central argument for the divine intervention throughout the psalm. Psalm 79 verses 1 through 4 plunges into the raw, unspeakable anguish of the community, devastated by invasion, sacrilege, and profound dishonor. It captures the horror of the people witnessing the utter destruction of their most sacred institutions and the brutal violation of their kin, leading to a deep spiritual confusion and national shame. So what profound wisdom can we draw from these opening verses in our Wisdom Trek today? Well, first, this psalm validates a deep trauma and a spiritual crisis that arises when sacred spaces are desecrated and when the innocent suffer brutally. It shows that it's permissible to cry out to God with full, raw emotions, even questioning his apparent distance in the face of overwhelming evil. Secondly, it highlights the immense significance of God's inheritance, his people and his dwelling place. An attack on them is perceived as an attack on God himself, directly challenging his honor and power. Thirdly, the horror of the unburied dead serves as a stark reminder of the extreme cruelty that can accompany warfare and the profound value of human dignity, even in death. It speaks of the utter brokenness in the world where such atrocities can occur. Finally, the psalmist reminds us of the suffering can bring a profound public shame, and that the enemy's goal was not just for conquest, but a desecration of all that is holy and a humiliation of God's people. The psalmist's desperate cry is a model for appealing to God's own honor when all seems lost, trusting that he will ultimately act and vindicate his name and his afflicted people. This sets the stage for the rest of Psalm 79, where the plea for vengeance and restoration continues. Let's learn from Asaph's lament, bringing our deepest anguish before God when the world seems to crumble, trusting that even in the midst of ruin and shame, our cries for justice and vindication are heard by God who remembers his covenant and his glory. Thank you for joining me on our powerful and poignant trek through the opening verses of Psalm 79. I trust that this exploration of deep lament and national tragedy has resonated with your own journey and has equipped you to bring the deepest cries to our attentive God. Join me again the next time as we continue to seek and apply the timeless truths of God's Word. Until then, keep moving forward, enjoy your journey, and create a great day every day. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, reminding you to live abundantly, love unconditionally, listen intentionally, learn continuously, lend to others generously, lead with integrity, and leave a living legacy each day. I'll see you next time with more daily wisdom.